Good evening. It's Wednesday, and following up on Sunday's message, Sunday's idea from the sermon on these promises we make until death parts us. Promises to husbands and wives, promises to parents, promises to children, to siblings, to friends. We really do make promises. And we need to make those promises. And I'm a big believer in big promises to a few people. We can be spread wide in influence and spread wide in care. But most people track through life on 2 or 3 people. And if those 2 or 3 people are missing, if those two and three people are erratic, it tends to show up. On the other side, where 2 or 3 people have gathered in the hope of loving someone, that someone usually knows it and benefits from it tremendously. So that was my idea, that there's very little you can do that will surpass loving 1 or 2 people uniquely. 1, 2, 3, family, all that, but you know the circle of people who depend on you in a unique way and for whom you're irreplaceable. And so my call for you is to continue to do the work and keep the promise. Of course, the promise comes from this great line from Ruth to her mother-in-law Naomi in Ruth 1. Ruth says, "Don't urge me to leave you or to turn back from you. Where you go, I will go, and where you stay, I will stay. Your people will be my people, and your God my God. And where you die, I will die, and there I will be buried. May the Lord deal with me, be it ever so severely, if anything but death separates you and me." And so, of course, the story is Ruth follows Naomi back to her home country, into Bethlehem, and sets out to serve Naomi and keep that promise to Naomi. And so we read a story like this, and we wonder, what can go wrong? I mean, what can go wrong when one person promises to love and care for someone, find identity, move, share faith, share culture, take on all the risks? What can go wrong? And of course we know everything can go wrong. And so with Naomi, what can go wrong with the person you're trying to love? So in the story, Naomi is a widow. She's now childless. She's bitter. She is pessimistic about the future. And of course, what you see is that she's trying to send Ruth back. She's really reluctant to see that Ruth can be any help for her at all. And when she looks back and talks about her life in Moab, all she talks about is loss. When in fact, her life in Moab wasn't all loss. And when she looks behind her, what she really would see if she looked is Ruth. Her help is there. So it's so obvious in the story that we should take to heart as well, that sometimes the people we're trying to love till death parts us, they are a little bit reluctant to be loved. They're a little reluctant to take the help, and they might actually be overlooking all you're trying to do for them and what you mean in their lives. We begin there, which is the most obvious place to begin, that the people you're trying to help may not always see your help as help. Recognize your love as love. Every person you're trying to help and love, like Naomi, has a personal history. She had a history long before Ruth knew her. She has needs, she has struggles, she has limitations. She's got character issues like everyone else. And so we, of course, do well to keep that in mind. That if someone's setting out to love Naomi, like Naomi needs to be loved, she is not a blank piece of paper. She is a unique story with unique needs and unique flaws and unique struggles and unique gifts. But she is who she is. And so it's required that anyone who sets out to love someone must be realistic about the someone you're setting out to love. It's different for Naomi. She is a unique figure in the story. And there's only so much she can give back. There's only so much she can own. There's only so much she can help with someone like Ruth wanting to help her. So in the story, we get all those layers. The reluctance of Naomi and initially overlooking the help she got from Ruth. And again, we should keep in mind, if you're setting out to be married, you might have married someone who's reluctant to be loved, to be helped, to be guided, to be shepherded through change. If you're setting out to love children, teenagers are occasionally reluctant to accept help and love. If you're trying to love your parents, they have their own limitations. They think they know everything, just like teenagers do. But we have these other things that are also there. There are unique layers in every human. That is, every human needs help to make it. Every human has limitations. Every human has problems. Many humans have actual disabilities, have actual mental health issues, have actual seasonal times in their life that are more harder than others. Children, we presume the best about our kids, but in time, we as parents figure out these children have limitations, and they need help in ways they might not ever ask for help. They're limited, or as I like to say, they're broken. And our parents, age changes people, absolutely changes people. Life gets heavy. Physical changes and pain change the way a mind works. And limitations creep in and disabilities creep in. So it's the obvious thing to say that when you're setting out to keep a promise to someone till death do you part, it's not a promise you make to the universe, it's a promise you make to a person. And to make that promise to a unique person is to be realistic about what it means to make a promise to this person, not another person. This promise you make has to be catered to this person and not to someone else. And it means accepting the limitations and the weaknesses and the frailties and the brokenness and the sin and the grace and the kindness and the strengths. It's a package, and you're trying to love the whole person. But it's not choosing one among 100 and just trying to find the best case scenario. It's generally us being called into action to love someone and accepting the person as they are, and sometimes not having a lot to do with how the person got to be who they are. But we're loving and we're caring. So it's worth realizing the people you are trying to love until parted by death are fully human, fully human, fully flawed, broken, living with some level of self-interest, needing you, needing others, maybe not wanting you. As I mentioned, this is a lot of gravity to get past. To get this rocket off the ground is a lot of work. To love someone till death parts them is a lot of work. And so you've got to be realistic about the people you are trying to love. So my relationship with my kids, when they were younger and now, had a certain flavor about it because these two boys were not like any other two boys in the world. And uniquely, each boy was different as well. And so Jennifer, together we would strategize about what the boys needed, how to love, and we still strategize about how to love these two boys till death parts us. And loving Jennifer she's a unique person, and I'm a unique person, and we love each other in ways that we find redeeming and helpful. It doesn't matter really how other people are loving. What matters is that we love each other, and we know how to do this for one another, and we help each other thrive till death parts us. So it's context. When we set out to love, we've got to love uniquely. So it's a bit like the story I've quoted so often in John 21, after Peter has denied Jesus 3 times, and then we've got the appearance of Jesus, and then Jesus asks Peter 3 times, do you love me? Which hurts Peter's feelings because he knows the correlation. And yet what Jesus is actually doing is giving Peter a way to redeem himself, to affirm his love for Jesus after he showed his love was limited by denying him 3 times. He doesn't do that to anyone else, but that's what Peter needs. And he knew what Thomas needed, and Thomas needed to touch holes in the hand. He knows what each of us need to feel fully loved and to be loved in such a way we know it's God doing the loving. So just as God takes each of us seriously, we've got to take the people we love seriously as themselves and not keep holding out that there'll be someone else that we can finally love either without effort or with obvious return. That's not what this has to be. You've got to be realistic about what it means to love the person you've set out to love till death parts you. So what can go wrong is, first of all, found in Naomi, the one being loved. Lots can go wrong in the one you're trying to love. But a lot can also go wrong in the one trying to do the loving, and that is Ruth. A lot can go wrong in Ruth as well. And we know from the story her willingness is great. But of course, she's young and she is able. But what we also know is anyone setting out to love till death parts has to love through the limited lens of her own life. And so while she's willing, she's also a widow. And she is going to struggle in this new land, new culture, new place. The poverty, the gleaning the fields, the limits, 2 widows in a home, the risks that she lives with as a young single woman in this land. All of this means that her life was being shaped by people she didn't know, by forces she didn't control. All of this is going on as this story goes on, the promise she's trying to keep to Naomi. So it's not just what she's got to work through in the woman she loves. She's got to work through her own self. And then, of course, when Boaz enters the picture and her future is going to change, and she's going to be a mother, this means loving Naomi in a different way, as a married woman with a family. But so much of what we look at in the story, Ruth doesn't control. But she is living with the limits of her own life, and she's living with the limits of the people around her. And so she's got her own limits, while she's trying to deal with the limits of the person she promised to love. So I think we've all discovered that gravity has kept us grounded. Not just the difficulty of the person we're trying to love, but our own inability to love unconditionally. Our own inability to love someone who needs to be loved a unique way, who maybe doesn't play to our strengths. You might be one who is all about movement, and you love someone who just wants you to sit next to her, or vice versa. You might be loving someone whose needs are ones you can't appreciate, whose disabilities are so far beyond what you experience in life, whose frailty makes you angry and threatens you, and whose behaviors might scare you at times. Well, this is the norm for many married people and parents of struggling children especially, but even personality differences between you and the person you're trying to love. The line is long. And what happens is you'll be confronted by your own unwillingness to change, your own unwillingness to accept this person and just love this person, even if he or she doesn't change. This is where it gets complicated. We have our own limits, and it's hard to accept. It's just really, really hard to accept. Story from some years ago. A woman had come to see me with her, I guess, almost adult son. And she brought me, I think, about a $700 utility bill and was trying to get it paid. And she had to have it paid so her grandchildren could come to live with her. And so I didn't have an answer for a $700 utility bill, but we were walking through all the financial needs and such, and she clearly had very limited income. But as we're talking, I said to her, maybe now's not the right time for your grandkids to come live with you if you just really can't afford bills like this. And I said, maybe you just can't afford to do this right now. Maybe there's another way to care for them and love them. Maybe you just can't afford for them to come right now, and maybe later if things get better financially. Well, she went on her way. I didn't think a thing about it again until a couple of years ago, I guess it was. I don't know that I remembered her, but on another issue, she asked me if I remembered her, and I said no. And she said, no, we've met. And she told me, she said, with some anger, she said, you told me I couldn't afford my grandkids. So she said it that way. At first, I didn't remember the story at all. As I was driving home, I remembered the story. But she said it in such a way that I know I didn't mean, and I know I wouldn't have said. I was right. She couldn't afford her grandkids. The difficulty was, of course, she took that as an insult, that she couldn't afford her grandkids. This is where it gets tricky for us, is knowing what we can afford, what we can pay, what we can give, what we can do. And so the obvious point is we may need help, like in her case, to raise grandkids. The point is we all have limits. And so for all of us who are setting out to love someone unto death, we have to be realistic about that person's limits and what's required to love that person. And we've got to be realistic about our own limits and what we are actually able to do in loving another person. Now, love, of course, takes many, many shapes. Surviving love until death, I think, requires that we are realistic about what it means to love someone. That is, in a story like this, there is a way that Ruth is setting out to love Naomi. And the way to love Naomi here is to leave her home and go with Naomi and care for her in all that the story reveals. But we should also keep in mind that there's 100 ways to be faithful to someone till death parts us. Just 100 ways. And to make those promises to love a handful of people for the rest of our lives, we need to be realistic about the limits of the people asking, the limits of the people receiving, and the limits of us, what we can give, what we can't give. And so the way we do this is to recognize that there is, first of all, never one way to love anyone. That is, some people may want us to love them in ways we really can't love them. There's things we can't do for them and never will be able to do for them. There's things we can't buy for them and may never be able to buy for them. They may want to be loved like they see another parent loving a child, or another husband or wife loving a spouse, or whatever the long story and case might be. We can't afford to do some things for people. We can't afford to be some places some people are. There are just ways we can't love someone if love is bound up in what has to be purchased and where we have to be, what we have to be able to do. There's lots of things we can't do for someone that other people do for their loved ones. That's okay. We can accept that. But that doesn't mean there's not other great ways to love someone. And so those are the things we do. We set out to love someone, love people uniquely from our own gifts, our own skills, and love other people. One of the best ways you can do to figure out how someone wants to be loved is simply to ask them. I say this with couples in premarital counseling, to tell each other, what things done for you make you feel loved? And in general, everyone knows the things someone does that makes them feel loved. Tell each other and keep doing those things. Kids can tell parents, parents can tell kids, husbands and wives can talk, brothers and sisters can talk. We can all do those things, and we can love each other realistically within all of our own limits. We can do it. There's always a way to be faithful. Always. There's always a way to be faithful, but accepting that faithfulness takes many, many shapes. We must accept, if we're going to keep a promise like this to someone, that some bit of our faithfulness will never be rewarded and never be noted and never be understood. Parents, of course, have to give up hoping kids ever understand how much work has gone into getting a child to adulthood. They can't. And even if they raise their own kids, they still can't understand what her parent did for her in her childhood. There's just no way of ever working that. We just give, and we have to accept that. But faithfulness can take many, many, many shapes. It might not be rewarded, but there are ways it can be rewarded. But it can be something we think about, speak about, and even talk to one another about. But what I do know is to love someone until death is something you must do as your own calling unto that person. That this is a person you're going to keep close to your heart, even if he or she doesn't know it, even if he or she hasn't asked. But you're going to make it a point to be faithful to someone uniquely and do all you can. But to go that route over a lifetime, to accept a call to love another, it's to accept all the different shapes and ways you're going to have to give and change in order to love. In order to love. That means you're going to have to be patient. You're going to have to be creative. You're going to have to be distant some seasons and close other seasons. You're going to have to come up with a lot of words sometimes and no words other times. But you're going to need strategy. Actual sit-down strategy on how do I love him today? How do I love her today? What's next in revealing love, showing love, following love? What's next? You really will never control what God does with your love. You have to surrender that. You have to surrender what you hope they feel about you, what they hope they think about you, what you hope they'll say to you someday, what you hope they'll say to others someday. We all have these ideas of what we hope it will be, but we really can't live for that. We have to set out unconditionally loving and trust that love never fails. So to follow the road of patience, kindness, and goodness, we keep following this road toward someone we love, and we trust that love will do love's work. And we trust that God is always working more through this agape love, this charitable, kind, giving, self-giving love, that God is working through that agape love through us in the same way that agape love was how he loved the whole world and sent his only son. It is the great strategy to love someone charitably. It's how we do it. So a week or so ago, a young man had gotten in some legal trouble. He wasn't from the community, but he'd been arrested and then been released early that morning, but was far from home. Columbus being home, his caravan of friends had moved on without him. And so he was walking through town early and got to the courthouse, and they gave him my name and Jay's name, and the young man came over. I got Jay, we sat with him, and he really was in trouble. He was really far from home. He just had troubles. And so Jay and I just worked out what he needed. Calling his boss, we worked out all the details of what he needed. And Jay took him to Cincinnati. He got on a bus for Columbus and got back to his job, and things are okay. But when we were with that young man, we had to be patient and unpack every part of the story and also ask what was the best scenario for help. Maybe it was going on to Columbus, and maybe it wasn't. We took the time to talk to him and ask him what he really, really needed in his life at this point. And so we made him the most important part of our day that morning. And then Jay, of course, took him on to Cincinnati and gave him more time. But there was a way to love this young man. There was a way for us to let him know what it meant to be loved. And so we did what we did, found a way for him to get back home. What he does with our love is up to him. Whether he tells people, tells his mother, gives praise to God, we don't know. But it doesn't matter. What mattered was we strategically found a way to love this young man in the moment that we had him. And that's what we're all trying to do. Every so often, someone will drop in our lap, and it's obvious this person deserves all of our attention. But there are a few people in your life who deserve a lot of your attention. And strategically, there's a way forward. Faithfully, there's a way forward. Realistically, about who you're trying to love and who you are, there's a way forward. You can't do everything. You shouldn't do everything. But there's a way forward. And so it's a matter of asking God, please show me the way to love this person now. This time, this season, my life, my skill, my resources, her needs. What's next? Is it a letter? Is it money? Is it prayer? Is it time? Is it help? Is it leave her alone? Is it get in her grill? We do all this. We do all of it, and we find a way to love people uniquely. But it is a great adventure. To be called to love someone is a great calling, and I hope you accept those handful of people in your life who are unlike anyone else, and that there is no one behind you to replace you in their life. There's no one like you. And so you live and love as if there's no one behind you. And so you take it seriously, and you give as only you can give. Great to see you this evening. Please go in the grace and strength and mercy of our Lord Jesus Christ, our great, great help. And know the love and care you're giving to someone is never wasted, because love really never does fail. Continue the good work. Would you pray with me? Our Father, be our help today. You know the names of the people we're trying to love. Help us stay true to them. And God, there are people trying to love us. Help us to listen to them and accept their help. And God, may we know you are part of all of this work. In the name of Christ we pray. Amen. God bless.